Thank you all for being here today. My name is Jenna. I am one of the Adopt a Stream State coordinators, and I'm going to be leading this Lunch and Learn session today. And then we have two kind of Zoom co-hosts who are bravely taking this on with me, Cecilia and Jackie. I don't know if you all want to, yeah, they just waved their hands. So I want to thank them for being here today too. And again, I mentioned this as people were kind of coming in, but this session is going to be recorded, and it is being recorded as we speak. So if you want to turn your video off, then you can do so. Just note that it's being recorded. So if you keep your video on, you're agreeing to your face being on the recording. And also we ask that you mute yourself as we go through things, just so everyone can hear. Another thing is that we ask people to hold their questions until the end. As I said, we kind of have a lot to go over, so we just want to make sure we have enough time, and hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to address everyone's questions. So if you want to jot them down and to remember them for later and bring them up when we open up the question session or part at the end, that would be really great. Another caveat that I just want to point out here at the beginning is that we're going to be going over some online mapping resources and applications today, but there are so many out there. There's a whole plethora, so this is by no means comprehensive. We're just going to be going over a few kind of user-friendly, familiar applications for people as Adopt a Stream starts to encourage their volunteers to use these resources. And I also want to point out two other people who have talked about this for Adopt a Stream before. Dr. Chris Kodani did a session about how to map your watershed on ArcGIS Online, which is on our YouTube page and also on the online mapping page that I'll be going over in a little bit. And also John Becker kind of broadly described online mapping resources and web applications. But this session, some of the feedback we got from John's session was that he went a little quickly and didn't quite go into enough detail for some people. So we're hoping that this session will go into some more detail and show some examples of some of the applications that he brought up during that session. But yeah, so as we go through things, if there's something that you think that we should add to our online mapping resources list, feel free to let us know after. We are definitely open to suggestions. And so I want to say that as well. All right. And then, yeah, so I guess why online mapping resources? So as all Adopt a Stream volunteers and people, who are monitoring water quality are aware of, activities that are taking place just adjacent to your site or your water body are obviously going to be affecting the water quality of that stream or water body. But something that's kind of easy to forget about sometimes is also land uses and activities that are taking place in that broader watershed, not just right next to the stream, are also going to be impacting the water quality of your stream or water body. And so that is, if you've attended an Adopt a Stream workshop, then you are familiar with this concept of a watershed, right? So the land area from which water, sediments, and dissolved materials all drains to a common point. For Adopt a Stream volunteers, that common point is typically your monitoring site or sites. And so to kind of encourage our volunteers to think about this, we suggest that they do a watershed assessment every year. And so that's what I want to just go over real quickly, is point out a few things on our watershed assessment, and then go through the online mapping page that we'll be talking about today. Okay, so here we are on the Adopt a Stream homepage. If you go to materials and resources, and this new web page that we're going to be using kind of as an outline for this session today, our online mapping resources page, we have a link to our watershed assessment that I was just referencing. You can also find it under the data forms page over here, but right now we're just going to click on this one. And so if I'm going to draw your attention to just a few things that we can use these tools we're going to be going over today to get information for that's asked on this watershed assessment. So the first thing that we ask volunteers to do when they're doing this is to map their watershed. So we're going to be going over lots of different ways to map your watershed today. We also ask for the size of the drainage area of the watershed, the percent impervious surface coverage. Those are two important factors. And then also we have several pages of different land uses and activities that we ask that people take a look at that are occurring both adjacent to the water and also in that broader watershed, but not right next to the water necessarily. And so those are broken up into different categories and ranging from construction to industrial cleaning to solid waste stations. And so lots of different activities that we ask people to be aware of and maybe note when they're doing this annual watershed assessment. So bearing that in mind, as we go through these things, because I'll be referencing it, I'm going to take us back to this online mapping resources page that we have basically put together kind of, like I said, some user-friendly or like familiar applications that people can use to map their watershed and help them with the watershed assessment, or if they're just kind of interested in exploring around what's going on in their watershed. These are some useful applications that we'll be going through today. So this little chart, the applications are up here on this top row, and their different functionalities are listed right here. And so, for example, USGS StreamStats, the one we're going to be going over first, you can use it to delineate your watershed, look at different land use types, and also find out what the impervious surface coverage is. And so all of these different applications are kind of listed below. Apologies for the formatting. I'm on a very wide screen today, and apparently Drupal does not like this screen very much, so my apologies. But so these applications are listed below, and then there's other mapping resources down here too. But today we're going to be starting with StreamStats. So everything that I'm talking about today can be linked, is linked on this website that we're on right now. So I'm just going to open this link in a new tab, and we're going to be starting with this application, a USGS application called StreamStats to delineate our watershed. So you can see there's a nice map of the US, and we're going to be zooming in today to Georgia. So once you zoom in far enough, it will ask you, to select a state. So the state we're going to be selecting is Georgia. And then the site that we're going to be using for many of our examples today is in Rome. So we're going to zoom into Rome. You could also type in Rome, but I just wanted to have this fun zooming a little session right now. Okay, so if you see right here, it says zoom in to level 15 or greater to enable the delineation tool. So the zoom level is down here on the left-hand side of the screen. You can see we're at zoom level 14. So if I zoom into zoom level 15, you see that this is delineate button pops up here on the left. And so something else you can do here is kind of unclick layers. So these, this is your legend. And so this is telling you that these little kind of pink boxes with lines are different bridges. These blue grids are the streams. And then this is going to be where it's, the streams are excluded. But you can also unclick layers. So this national layers has different gauging stations and stuff like this right here. If we want to make our map a little less cluttered, we can unclick that and just focus on the stream grid, which we're going to be using today. So we're in Rome, and let's say that we frequent this park right here, Ridge Ferry Park, quite often, and there's a bridge here. And so this is going to be our sampling site for the day on this bridge right here. So we're going to click delineate, and then it's telling us to click on a blue stream cell to start the delineation. So we're right here, our site is when we sample off the bridge, and so that's going to be our clicked point. And so you can see that it's delineating our basin right now based off this sample point that we have selected right here. And it usually takes a few minutes because it's doing some, or not a few minutes, but a few seconds, maybe a minute or so, because it's doing its calculations right now, but it's normally not too long. And there you go. You can see that it has delineated our watershed. So this white line is going to be our watershed boundary, and everything that's shaded in yellow is going to be our watershed for this specific site. So anything, any land activities, land uses that are occurring within this shaded yellow area are going to be affecting the water quality of this stream called, or creek, excuse me, called Burwell Creek that we are sampling right around here. So another cool thing about USGS StreamStat is that you can get a basin characteristic report. So if we click continue, it will also be doing some math for us. But in this basin characteristic report, we're going to be able to check and uncheck different variables that we want it to calculate for us. Some of those variables being things that are asked on our watershed assessment. So to do this, you have to pick a flow scenario for it to do these calculations. So if you are interested in looking at different flow scenarios, you can definitely use this tool for that. For our purposes, we're just going to click annual flow statistics. And we're going to open this basin characteristics tab right here and see which variables we want to check to include on our report. And so this is the drainage area, right? So the area of this shaded yellow polygon. And there's different things about maximum participation on average in 10 years, 100 years, but what we're going to be focusing on today is the average percentage impervious surface area here, which is a little outdated. It's from 2011, but that's the most recent one. So we're going to click that. And we're also interested in percentage of developed land within our watershed. So we're going to click those two. And then we go down here. But as you can see, there's lots of different variables that you can click if you want to. And we're going to go to continue. And it's going to calculate these basin characteristics for us, which is really nice. And it will pop out a report. So we don't, unless you are interested in looking at the different flows, we're not going to be doing that today, but you could keep that checked. We're going to uncheck that for now. And we want to know this basin characteristics report. And so then we click continue. And you can see it pops out this really nice report that you can title. So we could title this Burwell Creek Watershed Report, or whatever you would want to title it. You can enter some comments if you want. It has a nice map of our watershed. If you remember from that watershed assessment that I briefly showed you at the beginning, we did ask that there is a map of your watershed, which is generated for you right here. It also has the drainage area here. You can see that it's 3.75 square miles. The percent impervious surface area is 17%. So 17% of this land area is impervious surface, which is a good thing to know about your watershed. They say that if impervious surface coverage is above 10%, then, and it's not mitigated, then that can impact water quality in that watershed. And you can also see that percentage of developed land is just over 0.5%. So even without going to this creek and to this site on this creek, we can already tell that this is probably a pretty impacted site that we might be monitoring if we were to do this. So you can save this. If you go to print and save as PDF, you could save it wherever you would want to save it. And another thing that we're going to do here is download the shapefile for this delineated watershed. So you go here to download and shapefile. And so the shapefile is essentially a geospatial reference file that can be uploaded to other applications. So if we open this right here, our download file, and we want this layers folder. So I'm just going to copy. I'm going to go into the layers folder. And I'm going to copy all of these. So a shapefile has 4 kind of different files all in one. So these 4 are the files for the watershed shapefile, and these 4 are the files for our specific site. And so I'm going to copy these, and then I'm going to put them in a folder that I can use later. So we're going to Jenna online mapping session for this particular one. I'm going to paste them right here. So you can just copy these files that you downloaded, or move them over to whatever file that, or whatever folder on your computer that you would want to be uploading from later. So we're going to close this for now. So this is StreamStat again, and we're going to come back to our online mapping resources page. So what we did with StreamStat was we delineated our watershed. We saw some of the land use, that over 50% was developed land use, and we got the impervious surface coverage. Next, we're going to be going to Google Earth Pro, actually. So we're going to scroll down here to Google Earth Pro. And if you open up this link, it will take you to Google Earth, and there's many different options. You can use it as a web application on your web browser. But if you want to do historical imagery, which is what we're going to be using Google Earth to do today, you're going to want to download the desktop version, which is down here. So you would follow this link to download Google Earth Pro on your desktop. I already have it downloaded, so I'm just going to open it right now. And so this is Google Earth, which I feel like many people are familiar with Google Earth, maybe, or they've heard of it. Adopt-a-Stream uses it to create maps when we go on our paddling trips and do some water quality monitoring and sampling on those trips. So we have our application open. What we want to do is import our watershed boundary files that we just saved from StreamStats. So to do that, we go up here to File, and we go to Import, and we go to mapping session. So you see that I don't see the shape files on here right now because I'm not looking for the correct kind of file. So I need to come over here and make sure that I'm looking for this .shp file. And when I do that, then they pop up. And so I want to import both of these files. And you go to open. It's asking me if I want to apply a style template. I don't for either file. So now you can see that the files popped up on this left-hand side in the My Places pane, although they do not appear on our map right now, and that is because they're not checked. So I'm going to check them, and then whoop, you can see that they appear on our map now, and I'm going to zoom out so we can get a better idea of what's going on here. And you can see again that we have our sampling site here, and this is our delineated watershed boundary. So what you can do is you can rename these. You right click on the file and you go to rename. And I want to say this is Burwell Creek Watershed. I also want to rename this one. You right click and go to rename and say sampling site. And you can also change the different properties like the style and the color. So right now the watershed is very opaque. We can't really see through it at all. So if we go down here to properties and we go to style and color, we can make it, oops, okay, we can make it a little more opaque, like 30%, maybe 35%. So we still see where the watershed is pretty clearly, but we can also see through it. So we see a bit more. And then when we go to the border line, we're going to make it black, and we're going to increase the width to about 3. Just to make it very clear when we're poking around on this map right now where the boundaries are for our watershed. All right, so we're interested in using Google Earth Pro for historical imagery right now. You can also use, for example, Esri has a way back imagery map, but that only goes, I believe, till 2014. But if Google Earth Pro can go all the way back to in the 90s, I think is the latest I've seen. So to access the historical imagery, you go to View, and then you click on Historical Imagery right there. And you'll see that a little bar popped up in the top left-hand corner. So you can kind of toggle between these different dates and see this historical imagery. These are all based on satellite photos, so that's something to keep in mind. Is that the image quality is going to be different for every photo, but you can kind of toggle back and forth and see that how landscapes has changed over time, all the way from 1993 to 2019. So just one way that you could use this that I want to show you all and draw your attention to for historical imagery is an example over here. So we want to start at, let's go back to 2014, and we're going to zoom in. And so one business, I guess, in our watershed is a storage center that is over here at this intersection right about here. And so we are zooming in, and you can see, so these things right here, these are storage units. And you can see that they kind of have 2 different storage unit areas right now. This right now being as of November of 2014. And so if we move this forward and we go to 2017, you can see that this area right here looks like it's starting to be cleared a little bit. There looks like there's something going on. And then when we go to 2018, you can see that there has clearly been new construction, and they have made a new storage unit area right here. And so because this the land on which they did this construction is within our watershed, it's very likely that the construction runoff had some impacts on water quality around or in our water body around this time. And so that's just something, one way that you can use Google Earth Pro as a tool to get an idea of what kind of historical land uses have been and could be around, or not could be, but have been within your watershed. So that is how you use Google Earth Pro for historical imagery. And now what we're going to do is save our watershed and our sampling site again as a slightly different file, because this next file we're going to save it as file type is going to be compatible with Google Maps, which I think is really helpful for people because a lot of people are very familiar with Google Maps. So you right click on it and you go to Save Place As. And so it's going to save it as a .kmz file. And so that's what we want, this .kmz file. And so we're just going to save it as Burwell Creek Watershed.kmz right there. And we're also going to save our sampling site, save place as, it's the .kmz and sampling site in my online mapping session folder. And so we're going to save it like that. All right. So I'm going to minimize that for now and go. We can exit out of that too. Go back over to our online mapping resources page. So if we go back up to our little chart, what we just did was using Google Earth Pro plus our watershed layer to look at land use activities, specifically historical land uses. So now we're going to go to Google My Maps and also look at some more current land use activities and different businesses that could be affecting our water quality in our watershed. So we scroll down here. Here's the link to Google My Maps. I'm going to open it up right here in a new tab. You can see that I have made quite a few maps now, specifically for this watershed, but we're going to make another one today. So you do need a Google account like a Gmail account to be able to log on to Google My Maps. And but it's a good thing because it also then helps you be able to easily share the map. So what we're going to do right now is create a new map. So it's going to pop up a new map here, and we are going to title our map Watershed, let's say assessment map. Okay. Cool, so you see that the import button is right here. So we're going to import those files that we just saved from Google Earth Pro. So you go to select a file from your device, and we want the watershed. So, oh, it's a little, I can't quite see because Zoom's in the way. Here we go. Okay. So we imported our watershed, and you can see that that's what this white outline is, kind of with very opaque coloring inside. And so we can change the coloring. We can either, oops, we don't want to delete it. We can click on it and go to this style button. And let's say that we want it yellow, maybe, to match the yellow of StreamStats, kind of nice. And you can change the transparency here too. So we don't want it quite super opaque, but we want it more transparent like that. You can also change the border width so you see exactly where those borders are like before. You can name it. So we're going to name this Burwell Watershed. You can also see that it brought with it the different values from StreamStats because that was saved. These attributes were saved to this file when we saved it. So this says drainage area 3.75. This is the impervious surface coverage 17% and percent of developed land area, and here is 54.1%. So that's something nice if you have, for example, let's say you're a volunteer group and one person is kind of taking the lead on this, and they create a Google My Map, and then they can share with people later. They could keep these characteristics so people just pull up the different attributes for this watershed, and they can see that they're already here. Someone else already did the work, but they can see what the result is. Okay, so we're going to save that. And then we're also going to come over here. We're going to rename this too. So watershed. We're going to add another layer, our site. Our site is not on here yet, but we want to add our site. So you go to add layer and then you go to import. And we're going to import that sampling site right here, that file. So it will bring it in. Boop, there it is. All right, you can do similar things here. It looks kind of boring and sad. So let's go to a very well-known icon that Google Maps uses, the little pin icon, and we can change the color. We'll make it blue for water. And you can also, again, title this. So this is our sampling site. You can give it a description if you want. We're going to rename it here to rename this layer for sample. Okay, cool. So this is kind of what we've seen in StreamStat and what we've seen in Google Earth Pro. But what's neat about using the Google My Maps is that people are very familiar with Google Maps just because it's an application that people use a lot. So if you remember back to the Watershed form, and there were all of these different kind of land use activities that it was suggested to look at to see whether they're occurring in your watershed or not. You can kind of use the search feature on Google Maps to see if those are occurring in your watershed. So for example, there was industrial cleaners was on that list. So if I type in industrial cleaning, or let's say cleaners, and search, it gives us, oh, there's a lot of noise coming on. Okay, sounds a bit better now. Then you can see that here's all of my search results, but we want to zoom in back to our watershed here. And you can see that there are here, there's an industrial cleaning service within our watershed. So that is a potential pollution source that we would note on our watershed assessment form. And you see this little button here, you can add it to the map, which is super handy. And you can also edit it if you wanted to, for example, we don't want that name, but if you were to say a description, potential pollution source, then you could, and you can also change it. So we could use, I think there's a pollution icon, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, this one, yep. So you can change the icon and you can change the color again if you want to just denote something like that. And then you would click this little X to get rid of your search. And then something else that we saw on our watershed assessment form was solid waste facilities. So if we type in solid waste, you can see that there are quite a few solid waste facilities around, and there also is one within our watershed. So I'm going to zoom in a bit here, and you can do the same thing. You can add it to your map. You can change the style, right, the color, and we're going to use this little pollution icon again. And you could write the description, right? So we'll say, again, potential pollution source. So this is something that the watershed assessment kind of asks people to do, is note these different potential pollution sources. And so this is just doing that in a virtual manner. Again, without even having been to this site, we can see that there are these potential pollution sources within the watershed that could be impacting the water quality of this creek that we're monitoring right here. Yeah, so that's another just great thing about how to utilize this Google My Maps tool to create your own very customizable map. And you can share it with people. So, and you can save it as well. If you go up here, there are several different options. You can embed it on a website. You can export it to a file to be used in a different application. You can, if you click on this little, oh, let's get rid of that solid waste search. If you click on this little share button right here, you can share it with a link. So just like you would Google Drive file or something like that, you can also, there's drive sharing down here. You can share it via Google Drive. So let's say that, again, there are a group and one volunteer is kind of spearheading the watershed assessment, and they're making this nice map on Google Maps. Then they can just share it with all their other group members who can easily view it and even add to it if they want to add to it, which is really helpful. So that is how we can use Google My Maps, but we're going to come back over to our online mapping resources page and talk about the EPA Waters Geo Viewer, which you can also use for a variety of things. So we're going to be doing a watershed delineation and looking at some of the facilities that discharge to water using this tool. So it can be found right here. Again, apologies for the formatting of this web page, but we're just going to open this link. It's going to open up this page where the tool is found. So we're going to click on this map to launch the application. This just gives us a little background information. So this is an ArcGIS web application, as you can see as it was loading, which I think some people can get very intimidated by ArcGIS. And so if you are intimidated, that's why we showed the Google Earth and the Google Maps kind of options. Or if you love ArcGIS web applications and totally want to dive into this, then that's awesome. And that's why we're going over it for those kinds of people as well. So right now you can see that the EPA thinks that Washington, D.C. is the most important place where this map should automatically open, but we're going to go back to Rome, Georgia. And here we can see right here that Rome is highlighted, and zoom in a bit. Okay, here's our Ridge Ferry Park that we're kind of using as our landmark for finding our site. And here's this road that crosses over the creek. So that's going to be our bridge sampling site right there. And we want to delineate the watershed again, but just kind of showing you a different way, a different tool to use that is this tool. So you come up here and it says drainage area delineation. So you click on that and you can click on which kind of delineation you want. We're going to do upstream with tributary. Sometimes it doesn't change that much. This is quite a small watershed, so it doesn't change. But if you were doing a larger river, you may want to distinguish between which selection type that you want. But you click one of them, you choose one of them based on what you're looking for, upstream or downstream, with tributaries or not. And then you click on this starting point little icon, and then you click on your sampling site, which for us is going to be right there. And then you can also put in a maximum distance or maximum flow time. Those are optional. We're not going to be doing those today. And we're just going to click on our point and hit run. And hopefully it will run. Now if we go to output, it's thinking. So that's the thing, the GeoViewer is a bit slower, I found, than StreamStat, which is fine. It just takes a few minutes. So in the meantime, while it's doing its thing, we're going to be talking about just some of the other capabilities of this web application. So the layers are kind of shown over here in this sidebar right here. And you can see that this is checked feature layers, but what kind of feature layers are checked? You can open up this little arrow. You see that surface water features are checked, and it's streams that we're looking at that are checked, and which would also be displayed in the legend right here. So the legend is up here and telling you what is being displayed currently on your map. The cool thing about the GeoViewer tool is that it has EPA linked data. So if we open up this little layer feature right here, you can see that there's all of these linked data, including 303D listed impaired waters, there's fish tissue data, there's TMDLs on impaired waters, water monitoring sites, non-point source projects, all sorts of information. What we're going to be looking at a little bit later once our delineation is done is this facilities that discharge to water. But there's lots of different things that you can explore using the GeoViewer, which is really, well, they're very water specific and it's very helpful. So we're just gonna, it's still thinking, which is totally fine. We're also gonna talk a little bit about these little icons up here. So this is just your information bar. And they have a link to a tutorial. They tell you where the data are coming from. You can contact them if you have a question or anything like that. The tutorials is helpful. It's also linked on our webpage too. And you can also change the base map if you want. So you could change it to, I don't know, this kind, streets at night. You could change it to topographic map. Oh, our delineation is done, but you can change the base map as well. Before we talk about the delineation, I'm going to keep going through these. So I already said this one is our legend. This is telling us what's shown on our map. So you can see that now we added something. We added this delineated area based on our watershed point. You can also print the map here. You can add layers. That's what this one does. You can measure the distance between different points. This is the tool that we just used, the drainage area delineation tool. And you can also use an upstream downstream search which is quite handy. And you can search for these different characteristics. We're not going to be doing that today, but that is a helpful capability that you can do. So similar to StreamStat and the other, the StreamStat files that we then viewed on Google Earth and Google Maps, you can see that the delineated watershed is outlined here in black, and they also use yellow to kind of shade in the land area of our watershed. And so what we want to look at, as I said, is going to be facilities that discharge to water. So we want to check that little box and note something, that after we check this little box, nothing showed up. And that is because all of the kind of higher level categories above this one are not checked. So feature layers is checked, but this EPA linked data is not checked. And because facilities that discharge to water is a subset of this category, we need all of the categories to be checked. So now you can see that there are all these little pink triangles that have popped up on our map. So just bear that in mind. That can be something that if you're new to using ArcGIS, you can forget to kind of make sure that all the categories are checked that lead down to the different items that you want to be examining. Okay, but we're going to be looking at the facilities that discharge to water in our watershed. It looks like there's 4 of them. You can see here 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so basically every time there's a facility that is discharging to water, they need to get a permit of some sort to be able to do that. And so if we click, let's start with this one. Click on this one. There's 3 different this specific point on the map, there's 3 different layers that are being examined, which is why this says 1 of 3. So first it's saying, oh, the area where you clicked on the map is part of this delineated area. Okay, that's good to know. And we want to scroll to the next thing. It's also a facility that discharges to water. That's also something that we want to know. It's also a stream, a surface water feature of streams, because right here you can see that we're overlapping with the pink triangle, the streamline, and the delineated surface. But what we're looking at right now is this facilities that discharge to water. So if we go here to more about this linked data feature and open that in a new tab, it will lead you to EPA's Echo Database. So this is EPA's online database for enforcement and compliance history. So like I said, if a facility is discharging to water, they have to have a permit. So this will tell you all about the permit and compliance history for this specific facility. So you can see that this is a ready mix concrete place. If we scroll down a little bit, it will tell you this is standard industrial classification code, I think. So basically they have a permit, industrial stormwater permit for ready mixed concrete, or they have a general permit for ready mixed concrete. And you can keep scrolling down too and see whether they violated their permit and their compliance history, and you can see that they have violated their permit. So that might be like a red flag or something to note on your map, or maybe kind of follow up on a little bit. And they also give you some information about the watershed that this facility is located in, some of the pollutants that may be released, but it doesn't look like there have been any pollutants released. And it also gives you kind of a demographic profile of the surrounding area, which is kind of cool. So you can go from anywhere from 1 mile, 3 miles to 5 miles away from the site, and it will tell you some of the socioeconomic information of the population, which is pretty neat. Yes. So something else that I wanted to draw your attention to here, oh yeah, was the expiration date. So you can see that this permit is still active, 2021. So they have, it's good until next year. And so there'll probably be some more site visits. And as we go further into 2021, then there'll be more, and into further quarters, then there'll be more information that comes up here. So that's just one example of one of the facilities that discharge to water on our creek. Let's look at another one just for another example's sake. This one over here. Again, we need to scroll over using this little arrow until it tells us we're on the right feature, which is facilities that discharge to water. And again, click on this more about this linked data feature tab. We'll open up the Echo database for this specific facility. And you can see that this is the storage center. This is where we were looking at on Google Earth, if you remember. And they had a permit for construction stormwater. And this permit expired in 2018, which actually matches up perfectly with what we had already kind of deduced using historical imagery on Google Earth Pro, if you remember, was that it had started to be clear, they had started clearing the land around 2017, and by 2018, the construction, if you remember, of this new storage unit, which was over here, was done. So, and did they have any violations of their permit? They did not. It looks like they were following their permit to the T, which is really great. Yeah, so that's just one way to use the GeoViewer to kind of see different dischargers that are discharging to the water body that you might be monitoring, which is really, really helpful. And for this one, if as far as sharing, there's this print button up here. You can print the map. If you are an Esri WebGIS user and you have a valid ArcGIS Online account, you can save your results into your ArcGIS Online workspace, and there's a way to do that. But if you just want to print it, you can do that too. Yeah, so we're going to be moving on to the next tool, just to make sure we have enough time to finish everything and hopefully get to some of your questions, which is going to be this EPA How's My Waterway tool. And we're going to be looking at some of how you can look at the impaired waterways using this tool. So scrolling down, here it is, EPA How's My Waterway. We're going to open it. This is a really great application. I really like this one. It is, it displays similar data to GeoViewer, but it's more user-friendly, and it was specifically developed for the public, and it's also mobile compatible. So you can take it into the field and basically stand by the edge of a stream and click this Use My Location button, and it will search and give you a list of the waterways within 5 miles of where you're standing and their condition, which is really awesome. We're going to be using it through a web browser today, but just know that it's also a very handy field application. So we're gonna, again, search Rome, Georgia again. And this is different because this isn't site specific. This is more like general area specific. So I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit because we're interested in the general area of Burwell Creek, and right now it's not quite on there. So we're gonna click this area, change to this location. Yes, we do wanna change to that location. And now you can see that we're looking at some of the different water bodies that are within this dashed area. This is not a watershed delineation, so that's just something to bear in mind. This tool is not site specific like the other tools were. This is, again, just a general overview of area around somewhere that you're interested in finding out more information about. But we can see that Burwell Creek is right here. And this gives you like an overview of the water bodies, again, within this dashed area. So it's telling us that there are 4 water bodies, and it lists them down below. It's telling us the condition of the water bodies. So all of them are impaired, which is unfortunate. But again, I think going through the different land use types and such, and impervious surface coverage, we probably could have intuited that the water bodies, at least the one that we're looking at on our site monitoring Burwell Creek, would likely be impaired, and it is. Although it may not necessarily be for that reason. We can see maybe a bit more about that in a second. You can also turn on monitoring locations, and then these little purple boxes pop up. And so it looks like there's a monitoring location close to our creek. So you can click on that box and it will give you a bit more information. This organization that's monitoring it is USGS Georgia Water Science Center. And you can see that they have some data on nutrients, metals, and other physical data. And so you can, if you were interested in kind of getting more information, then you can use this to do so. But for now, we're just going to turn those off, and we're going to click on Burwell Creek, this one here, to get a bit more specific information about this creek. So the last year that this creek was reported on was 2020, and where they classified it as impaired and by Georgia EPD. And it says that its evaluated use was aquatic life, and it was determined to be impaired. And then impaired because of PCBs. So if you didn't know what PCBs were, this little book is basically a glossary. So anytime you see the book, you can click on it and it will give you a definition and kind of tell you a bit more information about that term or that phrase or something like that. So this is just a bit of background on PCBs if you didn't know what they were. Again, because this tool was designed with the public in mind, as I said, which I think is very, very helpful. So you can also view, this is like an overview of Burwell Creek's status, but you can view a specific water body report. So I'm going to click on that. And dun, 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 here's the water body report. Assessment information from 2020. You can click on this expand all arrow and see that it is impaired because of PCBs in fish tissue. And you can see again also here probable sources contributing to impairment are industrial/commercial site stormwater discharge that is permitted. So that could have been discharge from some of the permitting or the permits that we viewed earlier on that Echo database, like the one from the storage center. There's also another, we didn't look at this facility, but Rome High School was building a new football field and they got a stormwater discharge permit for that construction as well. And so this is telling us that those are the probable sources that are contributing to its current status as impaired. And then it tells you a bit about plans to restore water quality. So there have been 2 plans put in place. They're a bit outdated, 2009 and 2014, but if you click on them, it will also give you more information about the plans and which water body, like which waters are covered in the plans. And you can click on this plan if you wanted to read it, you could read it. But they probably have an executive summary in that plan, which could be interesting to skim if you wanted more information about that. But to come back to How's My Waterway tool specifically. So there's lots of information that you can find. I think it's great that EPA kind of put everything all in one place. So you don't need to go separately to the Echo database to try to find these facilities that could or could not be in your watershed. And they made it very, I think, streamlined and user-friendly to find all this information in one place, which is super helpful. Last thing that I want to draw your attention to before we close out is just these tabs at the top here. So right now we're on the overview tab, just telling us a little bit about overview of the different water bodies in our dashed area, but you can look at and see if any of them have been assessed for swimming. So not specifically in this area, they haven't been assessed for swimming. They haven't been assessed for eating fish, but if you were in a different area and you were interested in whether it's been assessed for swimming or fish eating, you could use this to determine that. They have been assessed for aquatic life, which is why they're all impaired. If you are interested in drinking water around the specific area, this will give you information about drinking water. This will tell you those monitoring sites that we kind of turned on earlier. This will tell you all the different locations and more specific information about what kind of data they're collecting and the different organizations that are collecting them. And identified issues in this area as well. So PCBs, that was specific to the creek that we we're using as an example today, but I guess some of the other water bodies in this area also have issues with bacteria and other microbes. And if you go to restore, I like this one too, because it tells you what Clean Water Act Section 319. Also, if you didn't know what that was, you can click on that and read about that, because some non-government people don't know what that is. So that's again why this tool is really nice and user-friendly. But it will tell you if there's any projects going on in the area. So there aren't any projects in this area, but there have been restoration plans. And so you could read about those restoration plans as well. And then this last tab is the Protect tab. And it will tell you about, if you go over here to protection projects, if there are any EPA funded projects in this watershed, which there are not, but there could be in your watershed if you wanted to check. And then if you go to tips, it will just tell you kind of what you can do as an individual to help protect the water in your area on a community level, with your school, in your yard, or at your home. And so I just want to draw your attention to one of the bullet points in the community section, which is volunteer to help monitor water quality, which either you all on this call are either doing or involved with somehow or supporting somehow. I mean, you're supporting it today by just attending this lunch and learn. And so in whatever way that you are involved with Adopt a Stream, we are grateful for your involvement and we're grateful for your work. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I hope that you're all still with us. That was a lot of information very quickly, but I want to open it up to questions. I haven't even looked at the chat yet, so if you've been putting questions in there, thanks. And if I didn't address something that you put in the chat yet, I'm sorry for that. We're gonna do that now. But yeah, if we don't get to your questions, please send us an email. Maybe Jackie or Cecile, you could drop the Adopt a Stream email in the chat if they haven't done that already. And again, if you missed something or I went too quickly, this recording will be uploaded to our YouTube page and also to that online mapping resources webpage that I kept referencing throughout the session. So you can find it there. Okay, thanks again, and definitely ready for some questions.
I can start if that's okay. Hopefully y'all can hear me. This is Rachel Thompson with the Glen Environmental Coalition. So I guess it was originally a question, but I think I've sussed it out and possibly figured out that the USGS StreamStats doesn't work for coastal areas, which is really unfortunate.
Oh no.
So I don't know if maybe y'all just want to put a note on your site for coastal volunteers that one doesn't work.
Okay, yeah.
But the other ones do, from what I can tell, because I was playing around with some of them while you were looking. When you were in the water view or the EPA Geo Viewers, I might have just missed it, but did you actually upload the delineation from the other?
No, I didn't upload it.
How you got the delineation in the Geo Viewer for EPA?
Yeah, I can show it again really quickly. Would that be the best way?
If that's okay with everyone else.
Yeah, I can definitely do that real quick. So that was here. Okay, so you go to this little icon here where it says drainage area delineation, and you click on it, and then you just want to make sure that's expanded. And then you click on this little starting point, and then you would click on a point on the stream. So it's going to automatically calculate and denote the delineated watershed for you once you click on a point.
Because the delineation feature, and I know it's like really hard in coastal areas because of the fact that we have tides, but if like that would just be such a blessing if we were actually able to delineate some of our land features. So anyways, I'm gonna see if I can get it for one of the creeks in Brunswick, and I'll report back if it actually works.
Yeah, please let us know, and we can definitely look into some things more specific to coastal areas. I know that one of the reasons that Dr. Chris Kodani used the ArcGIS Online example was because for some watersheds, depending on if they're what size they are, some of these applications like StreamStat may have difficulty with them. So another option is using ArcGIS Online, and his presentation about how to do that is on our YouTube page. But yeah, whatever you find out about how to use these in coastal areas, definitely let us know.
And do you mind if you send an email after this with like the recording and like resources or links? Can you send the link to that YouTube video too? If that's okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's also on that page, the online mapping resources page at the bottom. There's like a, I think it says Confluence something. What does it say? If you scroll all the way to the bottom, it says Confluence mapping sessions, and then there's links to the sessions there as well. Yeah.
Hey Rachel, if I could, just cut in real quick. Yeah, if you need any help with that, if you find that you're not able to get that out of the EPA, the Esri stuff is actually pretty, easy. So yeah, just send me an email, and some of these things only take a couple minutes to do. So I'm very happy to help out if you need. Not a problem.
And I guess maybe a secondary question is, do you know how good they are at picking up like stormwater basin type water infrastructure? Because again, everything gets so flat down here. It's very hard for us to figure out what water is ending up where, in what part of our estuary. And as of right now, the main way that we gather that information is usually when the city or the county municipality actually does some kind of stormwater study, which, they're investing in researching the whole stormwater basin, which obviously is costly. And so we're just trying to look at an avenue for people to know in a somewhat suburban area, you know, like the stormwater ditch that runs behind their house, what's upstream and downstream of it.
Yeah, that is a great question. I don't know off the top of my head what would be good for that, but maybe someone else on the call would be familiar with something that could be used for that. Another suggestion I would say is if you remember when I was on the GeoViewers, like the contact tab, you can email the people who are putting these applications together and ask them specifically about stormwater or coastal areas, and they might be able to provide some more helpful links, because they would definitely be in that world. Yeah.
There's a thing called watershedmapper.org that's kind of a simplified form of one thing we're showing. It's kind of useful for that kind of thing.
Yeah, watershedmapper.org.
I have an underlying data. How can one persuade USGS to change parts of HUC boundaries?
That one?
Because, for example, the HUC boundary in the Okefenokee Swamp is not correct. Also, probably near Waycross, and I know of a couple of other places.
Yeah.
This is Joy
Anyway,
Hinkle
many
with
thanks for
Georgia
doing this.
EPD.
Go back and review the
I was just going to say there actually is a process that USGS goes through to change those sorts of things with HUCs, and there's actually a staff contact at Georgia EPD. I am not that person, but I can get you in touch with him if you want. I will. Was that you, John?
It was much appreciated.
Yeah, I can get your contact information from Jenna from your registration for this call, and we'll get you in touch with them about that issue.
Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Joy. Really appreciate that. I can definitely connect you to make sure that he has the EPD contact for that. Wonderful. Well, are there any other questions? Okay, I'm kind of going through the chat now. I see.
Jenna, this is Javier Sayag. How are you doing?
Hi, Javi. I'm doing well.
Excellent presentation. Very impressed. Very happy with all the information you shared.
Awesome.
Also wanted to make a comment about Echo. I happen to be dealing with a case here with the city and a big polluter, and the information in Echo wasn't up to date. So the best source of information in that case was directly with EPD. So keep in mind in case somebody catches somebody an industrial site polluting the water. So you can gather general information on Echo, but if you want details and the latest information would be with Georgia EPD.
Okay, yeah, that's great to know. Everyone heard that Echo isn't always up to date. It's a good kind of starting point if you're looking for these things, but the most up-to-date information, how to obtain that would be to contact EPD. So thanks, Javi, for bringing that up. All right. Well, thanks everyone for attending and saying all sorts of nice things in the chat. We've reached the end of the hour, so I hope everyone finished their lunch. And if you have any other questions, yeah, please email them to us. And Jackie just put a link to the mapping page in the chat as well. And thank you all for coming today, or coming to your computer to attend this session. It was really wonderful. Yeah.
Jenna, that was awesome. You did great. That was fantastic. Really loved it.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon. Bye.